You and I are on the same page here. It's better for the teams who are looking for coaches, other than the reality that there's business that needs to be done in the month of January. That's the problem. There's business that needs to be done, and if you delay everything until February 14 at the earliest to make hires, you're really putting your team behind the eight ball as it relates to planning for that offseason. The scouting combine's right around the corner. Free agency is just a few weeks away. You're talking about a very hectic first month for a new head coach, especially if the first week or two is spent finalizing the staff. So the problem is the NFL's calendar is expanded to the point where it makes it less and less practical to have the rule that we think would be appropriate, everyone wait until after the Super Bowl.
There's no reason why you can't delay free agency. There's no reason why you can't delay the scouting combine a week. And again, look, the NFL expanding the calendar, they're the ones who did this. It's not like it just magically happened. The NFL expanded the calendar. And I just think at this point, how many times in the past have you seen a Super Bowl championship team or a team that lost in the Super Bowl? How many times have you seen one of those two teams and every one of the spots has already been filled? And so a team from one of the last two teams that the star on that coach's resume may have risen in the last 2 or 3 weeks, but they can't take advantage of that because everything's already filled. There's got to be a way to do this better. It is idiotic with a capital I, to be doing all of these interviews for Dan Quinn, getting ready for a playoff game, to be fending off suitors from coast to coast, and to be doing this interview on Zoom, or I'll do this one after this game, and then what do you think Dan Quinn is thinking about today? Look, I'm not casting aspersions on Dan Quinn, but if you're a Dallas Cowboys fan, I guarantee you that if you're a Cowboys fan and the 49ers win that game this weekend, one of the things you're going to think is that the two most important coaches on our staff, other than the head coach, were occupied by thinking about these other jobs. Fair or unfair, that's what people are going to think. And it's just wrong. It's stupid. It's not paying enough attention to the product and the game at hand.
First of all, and far more importantly than anything I will say after this, when you mentioned that Dan Quinn is fending off suitors, I couldn't help but think of the time when Kramer is living in the apartment in Hollywood and the elderly actress reminds him, I have many suitors. That has been in my brain now ever since, and I can't get rid of it. The other side of this is, as it relates to the distraction it's created, and we'll circle it back to Cully at some point. These are important philosophical concepts that I think need to be hammered home because it all happens so fast. Nobody ever taps on the brakes and asks, does this make any sense? I had a head coach explain it to me last year in a very appropriate way. As the team with which the candidate for other jobs, one or more other jobs, is currently employed, has a postseason game coming and has been interviewed already for one of these vacancies, what becomes the priority in the mind of that person, just as a matter of basic human nature? And the best way to put it is the way it was put to me last year, and you've probably heard this too, possibly from the same coach. When that coordinator goes home after a long day of preparing a game plan for a postseason game that is just 72 to 96 hours away, when Mrs. Assistant Coach welcomes the assistant coach inside the home, is the first question, hey, honey, how's the game planning going for the playoff game this weekend? Or is it, have you heard anything more about that job? That job, the one that would completely and totally change our lives, the one that would be the pinnacle of everything you've been busting your ass for and not being home for all these years, the one that would allow us to move into a house 3 times the size of the one that we live in, that would solve all of our that would finally allow us to pay off our student loans. Have you heard anything about that job? That's the disconnect that these guys have to process at a human level as they're focused on trying to win a playoff game.
Mike, I'll give you one other very practical thing that says it all about why it is stupid and idiotic for coaches to be considering other jobs while they're preparing for playoff games. I know a coach on a staff, an assistant coach on a staff, who is going to be available when all these musical chairs, when all the jobs get filled. What do you think he's been doing the last 3 or 4 days as he's trying to figure out where he's going to land next? I'll tell you what he's been doing. He's been talking to 3 coaches who are candidates for these jobs, 2 of whom are still in the playoffs, okay? And so this is not to cast aspersions on anybody, because this is the way the game is played. I don't hold this against the coaches who are still in the playoffs, that in their car on the way home from doing 12 hours of work for your job now, that what do you think they're doing in the car on the way home and in their car on the way to work at dawn? They're calling coaches to find out if they might want to be on their staff. Or during the day, during a break, they're texting coaches. They're doing all that. I can't believe that the NFL has never stepped in and said, this is wrong. This is all wrong. We have got to figure out a better way to do this. Because, and you ask, well, then the coaches just shouldn't call these guys. Well, that you have to be able to, when you do an interview, the McCaskies and the Wilfs in Minnesota and you know what they're asking potential head coaches? Who's on your staff?
Who's your staff? Tell us who your staff is.
Who would be your offensive coordinator? Who's your defensive coordinator? Who's going to coach special teams? You can't just get on a Zoom with the Wilfs and when they say get on, who's on your staff, you can't just say, well, I'm getting ready for my playoff game. I'll let you know when I get the job. That's not a good answer. So, Mike, all I'm doing is calling for sanity in an insane process.
And part of the reality as well, and I just coincidentally was texting with someone who has intimate knowledge of how this process works. I think part of the problem is a lot of these teams, the moment the job becomes open, they know exactly who they're going to hire, and that the search process is a charade. It's a ruse. It's an exercise in phony due diligence.
It's a mockery of a sham.
It's working your way backward through a maze to get to get everything in line so we can say we did it, and this is the conclusion. After weeks or days or hours or whatever of deliberation, we came to the conclusion this is our coach. And that reality, and the estimate is 70 to 80% from the person that I've been communicating with. 70 to 80% of these jobs, they already know from the moment they fire the coach, who they're going to hire. It doesn't matter if you wait until after
this year,
the Super Bowl.
But I'll explain.
And here's one of the other realities. Bad teams end up firing their coaches, and bad teams aren't bad simply because they have a bad coach. Bad teams are bad for various other reasons. Dysfunction oozes through some of these teams, and it plays out in having the lack of patience when it comes to giving a coach time to implement his processes, or the lack of talent that forces you to move on from a coach who could have, in the case of Joe Judge, according to John Mara, the owner of the team, developed into a good coach. The problem is the players are so bad the coach never gets a chance to show that he knows how to coach. But Peter, you can't tell me. And again, I keep telling myself we'll get back to David Culley because we need to talk about David Culley at some point. But with the Giants, prime example, when you're firing coaches 2 years into their tenures, 3 straight times, from Ben McAdoo to Pat Shurmur to Joe Judge, there's something far deeper wrong with your organization than we just coincidentally happen to have 3 bad coaches. That can't be the case. And if you coincidentally happen to hire 3 bad coaches, then there's something fundamentally wrong with how you're picking your coaches. But that's the problem. The dysfunction gets so deeply rooted in an organization, it manifests itself in these coaching changes, and then the organization that didn't know what it was doing to get to the point where it has to fire its coach has to go forward and find another coach. And you're sliding deeper and deeper into quicksand, and no one is throwing you a vine. No one is helping you to try to get out. And you're just desperate, and you're sinking deeper and deeper. And I feel like that sums up what the Giants are going through right now.
You know, you might I'm interested in this coach saying that 70-80% of the teams know who they want to hire when they fire
Not a coach. This wasn't a coach. This is somebody else. This was somebody else who's very, very familiar with the process, very intimately involved in the process.
And look, I mean, who's to say? I could be dead wrong on this, but I don't find that to be the case. Here's what I find to be the case. And let's go back to the famous Josh McDaniels case, which was now 4 years ago. Let's go back to that case. The Indianapolis Colts that year, because they picked Josh McDaniels fairly early, everybody said, oh, well, they must know what they were doing. Chris Ballard didn't know he was going to hire Josh McDaniels. He knew he wanted to talk to him. Absolutely. And he also knew that he wanted to talk to Mike Vrabel. And at the end, it came down to Indianapolis being very close and really liking Josh McDaniels and really liking Mike Vrabel a lot, okay? And so at the end of the day, and I forget what order it fell in. I forget if Tennessee picked Vrabel first, so I don't remember whether, the Colts picked their guy first. But I don't deny that some teams have some idea who they want to hire. But knowing who they want to hire in that case, and particularly this year, I think is bunk. And like, for instance, this year, is there one single coach, maybe other than Jim Harbaugh, who, if you go into business with Jim Harbaugh, it's going to have to be a figure of $10 million or more, maybe even significantly higher than that per year. And so there are going to be some teams that automatically are out because of that. And I just don't think that there is a guy out there right now who everybody says, I got to go get that guy. And you're seeing it. Mike, it is January 14th. There are 8 openings right now, and not a single coach has been hired, and nobody is even close to hiring one. So even though the calendar got pushed back 1 week because of the addition to the regular season, this is really a different year. And I think this year, absolutely it's wrong that 70 to 80% of the teams know what they want to do.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.